All right, sit back down. That's plenty. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Jameson Lopp. Jameson has been building multi-sig wallets since 2015. Is that the right way to say that? Multi-sig? All right. He is the CTO of Casa and also founded Mensa Bitcoin, Special Interest Group, the Triangle Bitcoin, and Business Meetup, and several open source Bitcoin projects. He enjoys researching various aspects of the ecosystem and giving presentations about what he has learned the hard way, while trying to write robust software that can withstand both adversaries and unsophisticated users. I feel like that was a little knock on all of us, unsophisticated users, but I mean, maybe I'm a little defensive. The topic is destroying indestructible backups. After years of dozens of stress tests and best devices for backing up seed phrases are quite clear, but what do you do when you need to destroy one? In this presentation, we'll cover considerations for which devices are both indestructible and easy to securely wipe. Now, while Jameson may be a genius, he needs to work on making the title of his topic a little briefer. Give it up for Jameson Lopp, everybody.
All right, that wasn't too bad of a roasting. I'll take it. Yeah, so I wanted to just try to give some practical advice that is applicable really to any of you, regardless of your expertise level. And one of my many random things that I've researched over the years is this topic of backing up your seed phrase. While my day-to-day job is helping people keep their assets and their private keys safe, backups are an important part of this because it's really about disaster recovery. So, why are we backing up seed phrases? Well, hopefully, if you have a non-trivial amount of crypto assets, you're using some sort of hardware device like a Trezor, Ledger, take your pick, to keep those keys off the internet. That basically protects you from like 95% of the things that could go wrong with people trying to steal your money and get your keys. But what happens if that device gets lost, stolen, blows up, melts down? These things are kind of fragile. Stuff can happen. You need to have a way to go get a new device and load your keys into your wallet. And while it may make sense that when you unpack one of these devices, it gives you this little piece of paper and it says, hey, write down your seed phrase, I actually find it kind of concerning. I think a lot of these wallet manufacturers have kind of cheaped out. Because if you think about it, what is a piece of paper really going to protect you against? The only thing that piece of paper does well is keep those keys off of the internet. You definitely don't want to be taking a picture of your seed phrase and putting it into your cloud storage. A lot of people have lost their money that way. You don't want to back up your seed phrase anywhere on a computer or internet-based device. But if you're keeping it offline, there are other things that can go wrong. So one of the things that I've come up with is a sort of threat model for some of the things that can go wrong. And this is basically physical destruction. So house fires are actually more common than I think a lot of people realize. Corrosion can happen in environments. For example, if you have storms or some sort of water or drainage leak. And crushing, of course, can happen if wherever you're storing that backup happens to collapse. So I have a number of tests that I have done on about 80 different backup devices over the years where I've tried to figure out exactly what are the best attributes of these backups. And like I said, there's probably over 100 different retail level backup devices on the market, and I've tested about 80 of them. And you can really categorize them in just a handful of different ways. You've got about half a dozen different form factors. So you've got your standard plate. It's just a single square or rectangular piece of metal, usually stainless steel. Then you've got your tile-based backups where they give you these pre-engraved or pre-stamped tiles that you just sort of slide into a cassette-like device. Then you've got other sort of rod-shaped, very strong and sturdy pieces of metal that you can engrave or stamp. There's a common form of do-it-yourself where if you're worried about privacy aspects and not buying something that you have to get shipped to you and then potentially have privacy leaks, like has happened with a number of retailers in this space, there are ways you can just go to the hardware store and buy some washers and a bolt and screws and basically make your own pretty decent backup for just a couple bucks. And then some other variations where you might even have rods with tiles in them and put those into a pipe and just try to make the thing more robust, or stack disks on top of each other. But then regardless of what form factor you have, there's a number of different ways that you can actually inscribe this data. And the different inscription types also has different attributes of what they can be robust against. So the common ones that you normally see are stamping, where you literally have this rod with a letter and you have to take a hammer to it. And if you've never done that before, I highly recommend not ever doing it because it's a terrible, terrible process. You'll probably end up injuring yourself if you're not really careful. And if you're like me, who has tested dozens and dozens of these devices, if you don't wear earplugs, then after doing a couple thousand strikes, you're going to have some inner ear pain. Center punch is one of my favorite methods. You can kind of see them at the bottom down there. It's literally, it looks like a pin, and all you have to do is just kind of put a little pressure on it, and it puts a divot into whatever piece of metal you're on. There's a couple different ways of doing etching, either by hand with a really sharp pin-type device or with a Dremel, which of course is electric engraving and can get a bit more force on it. Or you can get pre-engraved tiles, of course, which are very easy. And so just sort of from a perspective of usability, if you're out there surveying the market and trying to figure out what's going to be more user-friendly, this is kind of the list of what I find easier, but as we'll get into, these are not necessarily congruent with the robustness aspects of it. So stamping is probably the most common, but like I said, I really hate it. I don't recommend it. It is very robust, but it's not easy to do right. So what do I do when I test these devices? Like I said, I've got my threat model. We've got heat. I have this propane torch that I've measured that gets over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Your average house fire temperature is between 1,500 and 1,700 Fahrenheit. So I throw that in the flame for 20, 30 minutes, make sure it stands up well. Acid, I don't have months and months to spend of doing a saltwater test, so I literally use hydrochloric acid to sort of accelerate that. I figure if it can withstand a really, really strong acid, it'll be able to withstand something like brine water. And then I've got a 20-ton hydraulic press. I figure if your house collapses, you're probably not going to get too much more weight on it than that. Now, maybe if you're in the very bottom of a high-rise building or something. So if you really want to see all of the details of this stuff, you can check out this URL or scan this QR code to go there. And this is like all of my 80 devices. I have them all ranked by each of those three categories, sort of A through F grades. And at the very top, it'll basically have the best like 20 or so devices that really have straight A grade ratings for everything that I have tested. So what are the most common failures that we see? Well, what I found is a number of these devices could not even withstand a house fire temperature. Several of them cheaped out, and they actually are made out of aluminum instead of stainless steel. Aluminum has a melting point only around like 1,200 degrees. So obviously, that ended up in a pile of slag. Another thing that I've noted is that the devices that are more complicated, that have more moving parts, especially the ones that have tiles and things that you slide in and out of them, they tend to either have fasteners that fail, or they will just warp and deform as they're heated and cooled off. Because as part of my heating test, I also dunk the red hot device into a bucket of water to simulate, fireman coming through with a fire hose. You need to have, both the extreme heat and then the extreme cool off and make sure the whole thing won't just blow up on you. Another issue is that even if the device itself survives, you have to worry about, okay, what is the template on the device set up as? So I've seen some devices where instead of engraving the template, they just print it on with ink. Well, as you can see here, we've got a device. It's got data inscribed on it. The data is still there, but good luck reading that if you can't go and find the original template. And then finally, we've got some issues with some of the devices where the device itself stays intact, but due to the way that it is actually created, if it's deformed in the right way, some of these tube-based devices, you literally can't open them up again. So you would have to go find some really heavy-duty shop equipment in order to be able to retrieve the data out of there. So what are the strongest backups in my opinion? You want stainless steel or titanium. You really want it to be a small but thick, solid piece of metal. And I highly recommend using that center punch with the divots. Electrolysis is also really good, but that's not something that you come across very often. And then, of course, you want to make sure that that template is similarly inscribed or etched into the device. Now, this is all good and well, but I ran into a problem about a year ago where I had a seed phrase backup that I needed to destroy. And so I had some metal plates, and I had both stamped and Dremel etched the seed phrase into them. And the reason I needed to destroy it was that I wanted to make it more robust. And I basically wanted to use a process called SeedZor to split that backup so that it no longer existed only in one location. Instead, it's a 2 of 2 type of backup. So we have multiple copies of it geographically distributed. And that's because I wanted to improve the sort of physical attacker security characteristics against it. That's a whole other issue we won't even really have time to get into, is that if you do have a really strong backup, if somebody comes across it and you don't have any sort of encryption or sharding, then that's problematic because that attacker is probably going to be able to read the seed phrase, load it up into a wallet, and steal all of your money. So how do you destroy one of these backups? Well, if you're willing to forego some of the robustness characteristics, just use one of the tile-based backups. You open that up, you dump the tiles out, and you scatter to the wind, and you're done. But as I've seen from my tests, the tile-based devices are a lot more likely to also get destroyed and scattered during a catastrophic sort of experience. So what if you do have one of these robust, solid pieces of metal? That's the problem that I ran into. And essentially, I started whacking away at it. I said, I can't destroy the metal itself, but what I need to do is I need to make it illegible. I need to make whatever the data is that's inscribed onto this thing such that if an adversary gets a hold of it, they'll have no idea what's on there. So what I found out very quickly is that with stamping, you'd basically have to spend at least 10 times as long trying to destroy this device as you did setting it up, because you need to go and you need to grab a bunch of different stamps and you need to hit every single one of those letters and just put so many different letters onto it that it's impossible for an attacker to be able to discern what the original letters were. Etching is also really hard. I spent probably a couple of hours with the Dremel. Once again, thankfully with earplugs in, this was a terrible experience, trying to overwrite and overwrite. And if you know much about forensic analysis and data recovery, then you may understand stuff of for example, how difficult it is to truly scratch a serial number off of a firearm. If you scratch a serial number off of a firearm and law enforcement gets a hold of it, they can take it to a lab and they can do a sort of microscopic level analysis and still be able to see really deeply what those original numbers and letters were. And then eventually it kind of hit me, center punch. It's so easy to do because if you want to destroy or make illegible one of these center punch plates, all you have to do, it takes a couple of minutes, you just put divots in all of the other squares on that grid, and now there's no way of discerning which of the divots was original and which one was added later. So I would say the undisputed winner, both in terms of robustness for these metal backups and for the optionality to be able to destroy them or get rid of them or make them obsolete and deprecated, has to be just a single steel plate with center punch, because even though the device itself is robust and can't be physically destroyed, you easily have the option to make that illegible if you want. So, questions? Everybody's mind has been blown. Great, yes?
The plate you're talking about most, the punch one, what are those made of?
There are probably 4 or 5 different plates that are like that on the market. There's like seed plate and block plate, and these are all stainless steel, generally 4 to 5 millimeters thick. I would recommend at least 4 millimeters thick, because if it's less thickness than that, then it's a lot easier to deform in the crush test. And then if you really want to get deep into the weeds, there's of course many different types of stainless steel. If you can find one that is a marine grade stainless steel, then that will be even better with the corrosion resistance.
And then follow up, how much effort is needed to punch that punch? And do they make them out of titanium, or is that just too hard?
Yeah, so the titanium plates, tungsten, I haven't seen anyone do tungsten. Titanium, you can also do center punch. But really, it probably is only like 3 to 4 pounds of pressure to do that center punch. So even grandma can do it.
Maybe off topic, but where do you keep them?
Yeah.
And have you explored like BIP 189 or BIP 89 where you do the separation on multiple plates?
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the things that we haven't gotten into. So you can, for example, originally there was like BIP 38 encryption. There's also BIP 39 passphrase, where there are ways to like add additional data, and then you can have that additional decryption data basically stored somewhere else. Or you can do what you were saying. Forget if it's BIP 85 or BIP 89, but there are a number of different protocols out there for distributing these backups. And where do you put them is, of course, the real question. Personally, I recommend a distributed type of setup between different places that you have access to, places that trusted family members may have secure. And if you're doing it right, even a bank vault will work. The downside to if you're putting it somewhere like in a safety deposit box, which by the way are becoming a lot rarer these days, you only want to do that or put it in a like professionally managed safety deposit box if you have it split or encrypted, because you cannot be 100% sure that that safety deposit box won't be opened by an employee or even law enforcement or whatever. There have been a number of cases where things have gone wrong there. But the main thing is distributing these geographically, because the whole point of the backups is to be able to recover from a disaster that destroys your main wallet and your main devices where you're keeping those seed phrase active for regular use. All right, well, I'm glad to know that no one here is ever going to lose any of their crypto. This is what I've spent the past 10 years trying to help people out with. Thank you.